Thanks, Tommy. That was quite the end. They took down the photo of the guy going like, I think it was like this, right? I've been wanting to do this all morning after seeing that. I want the yellow spandex though, and the helmet. Yeah, I'm the freak. You should have just said I'm the Woo Whoo biohacker, dude. That would have covered it. The freak they brought over from the United States. Admittedly, if I'm moving a little stiff up here, I tore my back really badly yesterday morning doing tire flips, and I'm pretty high on an opioid-like pain-killing drug called kratom right now. So if I just melt into a pile of explosive diarrhea, that's my excuse. So I took a drug they're trying to. Oh, it's not a drug. It's a plant. It's really good at killing pain. It's really good for energy too. Anyways, though, so I'm on drugs. I was gonna talk today about 4 hidden variables that affect your health that a lot of people don't think about, but I expanded that to 7 because I was bored on the airplane. So you get a few bonuses today. I don't know if I'll have time for Q&A afterwards, but if you have questions, come and find me out there. We might have a little bit of time towards the end. And I took all the resources for everything that I'm going to talk to you about today, and I put them at that website, bengreenfieldfitness.com/IHS2017. Yes, that is my sneaky way to get you to visit my website. But I have the slides there and all the resources and articles related to everything that I talked about. So who am I? I used to, as Tommy mentioned, I used to be a bodybuilder, so that's kind of how I got into hacking the human biology, was trying to get my body fat percentage really low and pose up on stage in my underwear, and it was about one of the most unhealthy sports known to man, but it really allowed me to take a deep, deep dive into exercise and nutrition and biomechanics. And then I switched to the next most unhealthy sport on the face of the planet, Ironman triathlon. So I shed about 40 pounds of muscle, got rid of all that, and started competing in swimming and biking and running, and did that for about 8 years. And that's kind of another very geeked out sport where you want to study how to get the most out of the human body and how to get the most out of the human brain. And so my initial foray into this world of enhancing the human machine really just started from wanting to either look good in spandex or ride my bicycle faster, right? And it's kind of progressed from there into a lot of the things I'm going to talk to you guys about today, right? The things that are more important: your health, longevity, sleep, energy, things like that. So after triathlon, I merged into doing what I do now. I run around in the forests like a little gladiator. I travel all over the world for Reebok, and I do these things called Spartan races, where you crawl under barbed wire and haul Atlas stones and throw out your back doing tire flips and jump over fires that are made to look a lot bigger on television than they actually are. But that's what I do now, is Spartan racing. I live in Spokane, Washington. My wife helps me out with a lot of kind of like our healthy cooking tips, and she's a foodie. We have a little kind of like a self-sustainable tiny little farm out there with a bunch of raised garden beds and goats and chickens, and I hunt most of my meat. We grow most of our food. We're kind of off-grid on solar power and a well, and our home looks like this. It's out in the middle of the forest in Washington State, and I designed the whole house using a lot of the concepts I'm going to teach you today to be basically a stupid home, right? Not a smart home, but a stupid home, meaning that I've got all the walls lined. It kind of pisses people off who come over to the house because the walls are lined with metal shielded Ethernet cable, right? So there's no Wi-Fi. The only way you can get on the internet is by plugging into the wall, and there's no little Amazon button to order things through Bluetooth because there's none of the appliances are smart appliances. And there's HEPA air filters, and we've got all sorts of funny things around like water charging stations and ways to mitigate your exposure to EMF. Actually, a lot of the things I'm going to teach you about today. And when I go home, I feel like a freaking $1,000,000. I mean, you feel like you're supposed to feel, and I would love for all of you to experience the same thing and to feel really healthy all day long. Now, I'm going to talk to you about, like I mentioned, 7 different things that I've found to really give you the most bang for your buck, when it comes to your health, when it comes to your longevity, when it comes to your aesthetics, your body composition, all the things that really allow you to operate as a fully optimized human. Now, the first is movement, is exercise. Because some people do a copious amount of aerobic exercise. How many of you in here do like marathons and triathlons or 5Ks or bike races or things like that? A lot of aerobic type of competition. A lot of people do weight training. But what I've found is that there are, based on research, a few key principles that if you work these into your weekly protocol, you will have fully optimized fitness, okay? So the main things are, the first is VO2. VO2 is your maximum oxygen utilization, how much air your lungs can take in, the ability of your tissues to be able to extract oxygen from the blood as it passes through, and also your ability to be able to utilize that oxygen. So maximum oxygen utilization is something that ideally you sustain at a relatively high level as you age. And the best way to train VO2 max, you only need to do this about once every 2 weeks. 4 to 6 efforts of about 4 to 6 minutes in duration with 4 to 6 minutes of rest. Okay, so write that down for yourself as a note. One thing for you to do once every couple of weeks if you want to maintain your oxygen utilization as you age. Remember, everything we're talking about is not for like a professional athlete. We're talking about if you want all the parts of your human biology to really be working well from a cardiovascular standpoint. 4 to 6 minute efforts with 4 to 6 minutes recovery. You can do it bicycling, jogging, swimming, whatever you want, tire flipping. The next one is mitochondrial density. Obviously, as you may have heard already and that you're going to see more and more if you really delve into this anti-aging sector, increasing the density and the number of your mitochondria is very important, the powerhouses of your cells. When it comes to mitochondria, what research has shown is one of the best ways to increase mitochondrial density. It's very, very short efforts that are hard, followed by long recovery periods. And again, these don't need to be done that often. This is not like an everyday thing. About once to 2 times every couple of weeks, right? So about the same frequency as you do these VO2 max type of workouts. You do 30 seconds of hard exercise followed by 4 minutes of rest. And you only need to do that for about 4 to 5 rounds, right? So you get on a bicycle, you go all out for 30 seconds, and then 4 minutes of recovery. Then all out for 30 seconds, and then 4 minutes of recovery. So that's your mitochondrial density, right? And this is going to allow you to create your own fitness plan that's designed specifically for maintaining maximum fitness as you age. Now, the final component of your cardiovascular fitness is your muscular endurance. The way that you train this, again, is very simple. Has anybody in here ever done a Tabata set? T-A-B-A-T-A, Tabata. Okay, and it kind of sucks, right? But it's 20 seconds, as hard as you can go, followed by very, very short recovery periods, right? So for the mitochondrial density, we do long recovery periods. For the Tabata set, short recovery periods. So 20 seconds hard, 10 seconds easy for 4 minutes. And that's it, a little warm up, a little cool down. Now, for you to maintain muscular endurance, this would be about 2 to 3 times a week. You could do this in the morning, you could do it in the evening, but you choose 2 to 3 times a week that you do a Tabata set. And that's all you need to do for cardio, right? 1 VO2 max session once every 1 to 2 weeks, 1 mitochondrial density session once every 1 to 2 weeks, and one of these Tabata sets, preferably 2 to 3 times a week. Okay, so you're gonna be firing at all cylinders if you do that. Now, there's a few other things you want to train. Number 1 is strength. Now, when it comes to strength, there's 2 different things you want to focus on. Number 1, your explosive, fast twitch, powerful muscle. There's a very interesting study. I'll link to it in the resources page on guinea pigs, where they show that this fast twitch, like wiry, explosive muscle is actually more important than like muscle bulk that you have to carry and that you have to cool. So when it comes to longevity specifically, you want some of this fast twitch, explosive muscle fiber, but you also want to do what I called, when I interviewed this guy right here, Doug McGuff, a combination of kind of like cardio and strength at the same time by also lifting weights very, very slowly. And so for a weight training protocol that targets both parts of your muscular coordination, once a week you do a very, very super duper slow, right, like a 30 seconds down, 30 seconds up type of protocol where you're just hitting a few different body parts, right, like chest press, shoulder press, row, pull down, leg press, right? 5. So we're talking about 12 to 20 minutes of exercise for that strength training session. The other one that you do is something much lighter, but faster and more explosive. Did anybody read the New York Times article that came out a couple of years ago on the 7-minute workout? It's like 14 different exercises. You do 30 seconds of each one as fast and explosive as you can with 10 seconds of rest after each. So you're just kind of bam, 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 bam. Super great example of an explosive body weight workout that is very, very quick. Right, and I put this together for you guys as an example of something you can do, and with literally we're talking about less than an hour a day being able to maintain extremely high levels of fitness by utilizing some of these protocols. All right, so about once a week, maximum 2 times a week, you do like a super slow strength protocol, and once a week, maximum 2 times a week, you do one of these explosive body weight type of sessions. Lots of specifics that I'll give you as far as like articles that go into that on the resources page for this. And then 3 other areas that you want to focus on. Number 1 is stamina. I like to think of this as your maximum fat burning capacity, your ability to be able to go for long periods of time burning your own fat as a fuel, that primal human ability to be able to walk and navigate and hunt and fish and do all the things that we had to do for much longer periods of time back in the day, so they tell me. But I mean, having been hunting before, I can tell you right now that it is actually, it's a cool ability to be able to just head out and go for long periods of time with minimal amounts of fuel. So for this, the way that I do this with my clients is once every 1 to 2 weeks, I have them get up in a fasted state and go out and do something easy for a long time, or like a long hike or a long bike ride. We're talking anywhere from 1 to 3 hours without taking in any food, right? Just drinking water. It's a really good way to begin to get your body to burn fats very, very efficiently as a fuel from an exercise standpoint. So we've got those different components, and the last 2 things that you want to focus on for a full fitness protocol, and remember, this one single page could comprise everything that you do for your fitness, aside from maybe playing sports every once in a while, for the rest of your life. This will hit all parameters. So the next one is balance. You want to make sure that you're challenging your coordination, your balance, and that includes like your ears, your eyes, your joints. One of the best ways to do this is to simply include components during the day that force you to kind of second guess, kind of wobble a little bit. For example, at my desk, I have a standing workstation, right? And it's like a little playground. There's one of these things called a fluid stance. Anybody ever use a balance board while you're working? Perfect example of something that challenges your balance throughout the day. Right, standing on one leg when you brush your teeth, or standing on the other leg when you're making dinner. I've got another mat by my office. It's this foam mat called a Kaibun mat, made in Switzerland, and it has the ability to just kind of shift under your feet as you stand there during the day, and it challenges again a lot of those little balancing postural muscles. So you figure out ways you can work balance in throughout the day. And then the final component is something we talked about. I took a lot of folks on a bike ride yesterday. When I finished up the bike ride, I told everybody I do 2 things each day. Anybody on the bike ride remember? So you didn't know there was going to be a test. 2 things I do each day. All right, you all fail. I get really cold and I get really hot. Okay, exposing our bodies to extremes of temperature has a really cool effect in terms of increasing stress resilience, nitric oxide production, blood flow, and that's my rule. Every day, well, I have more rules than that. For example, every day I try to do something that makes my brain hurt, right? So I travel with a harmonica, and I try to learn a song on the harmonica at the end of the day, right? Or I'll read something I'm not used to reading, like in an area that I'm not used to reading. Like I'm trying to study cryptocurrency right now, right? Which just makes smoke come out my ears because I'm a fitness and a health guy. But I go out of my way to kind of make smoke come out of my ears at least once a day. So I get that brain-derived neurotrophic factor and the neural growth. But I also get cold every day. Okay, so this morning before I came here, I turned on your fantastically cold Icelandish shower water. You guys' water gets cold here. Kudos. I love it. And you can drink it straight from the faucet. And I stood there for 5 minutes, right? So I turn around in circles, I get the lymph nodes, I get the back of the neck, I get the butt crack, I get all the areas that really don't want to get cold. And that's a perfect example of applying a mild hormetic stress to your body, meaning it's a stress to your body. If I were to stand there in the shower all day long, I'd probably be sick and tired and my nervous system would be shot by the end of the day. But that little bout at the beginning of the day, I do that, and then I also get hot every day. So I make it a point to either using exercise in hot weather or using a sauna or using something that makes me sweat. My rule every day is I have to actually break a sweat. I have to open up the pores and break a sweat, right? So you get cold every day and you get hot every day. You put all that stuff together and you're going to nail every component that you need to nail when it comes to fitness, okay? So Does that all make sense? He's going to go out after this and go do a Tabata set on the way home, sprint and walk. So that's movement. The next component is nutrients. And again, I'm going after giving you guys the best, biggest tips that I can in this talk. So when it comes to nutrients and it comes to your diet, I'm agnostic about the diet. I think these days, in an era of self-quantification, with the ability to test our genetics, with the ability to test what vitamins and minerals that we might be deficient in, with the ability to test what type of foods that our bodies are tolerant or intolerant to, with our ability to test our complete microbiome in our gut, there's all sorts of things that we can do to determine the exact diet that works for us, because what works for your neighbor across the street is not necessarily going to work for you, right? Like if you have, let's say, familial hypercholesteremia, right? So you get very, very high cholesterol in response to the consumption of saturated fats, like a high-fat diet. Well, if your neighbor across the street lost weight by doing, let's say, ketosis, right, and butter and coconut oil and grass-fed meat and copious amounts of ghee and everything you'd eat on a ketotic diet, that kind of screw you from a cardiovascular standpoint, right? And then the only way to know that would be you'd test your genes, you'd see what your cholesterol processing capabilities look like, and you would adjust your diet accordingly. For example, for that particular problem, high cholesterol or familial hypercholesteremia, you'd want more of what's called a ketovan diet, right? Which is a lot of fiber, it's a lot of plant matter, it's like 70 to 80% carbohydrate, right? So it's a completely different diet. But what I'm getting at here is that you need to customize your diet based on you, not based on whatever book happens to be the book that you see at most of the airport bookshelves for that week, right? So, and trust me, I'm in the fitness industry and I get pressured about this all the time. The best way to make money in the fitness industry is to write a diet book. That's why most people are doing it. It's not because they discovered that diet was going to work for everybody, right? It's a perfect example of a diet book that was going to be good would be like Rob Wolf's new book, Wired to Eat, right? Which has you customizing your carbohydrate intake in this case based on testing your own blood sugar levels after a meal, right? So you want to look for books like that have a good amount of customization, not a book that just says avoid all plants because they're bad for you, or don't eat grains and milk, which might be the case for you, but might not be the case, or do ketosis. So understand the concept of diet agnosticism and the ability to customize. What I do when I sit down to a meal is I really only ask myself two questions. Number one, is it nutrient dense? And number two, is it digestible? So let's take quinoa, for example. I don't even know if quinoa is, you guys do quinoa in Iceland, right? Or did I pick a horrible example? Quinoa? Quinoa? Yeah. That's how I used to pronounce it before I actually heard somebody say it. So quinoa, the superfood, super grain, super grass, whatever you want to call it. Is it nutrient dense? Is it? Everybody just had lunch. Kind of sleepy. Yeah, it's pretty nutrient dense. It's got a lot of amino acids, a lot of minerals, a lot of fatty acids. Is it digestible? It's actually covered in a coating of what are called saponins, which are a soap-like irritant to your digestive tract, because quinoa has a natural built-in plant defense mechanism that makes it want to get pooped out by mammals so it can grow elsewhere after you've consumed it, right? So quinoa is nutrient dense, but it's not digestible. Now here's where like and like no offense intended, but here's where like the paleo people go wrong, right? They'll say, okay, therefore I'm not going to eat quinoa. And I say, no, humans are smarter than plants, right? We can render it digestible. So if you take that quinoa and you rinse it, right? And then you maybe put it in a glass mason jar overnight and you let it soak overnight, then you take it out and you rinse that again. And maybe if you want to go to the next level, you sprout it, right? All of a sudden, quinoa satisfies that criteria of being both digestible and nutrient dense. Take sugar, for example. Is sugar nutrient dense? Not really. I mean, unless you're chewing on a reed of sugar cane with a lot of fiber and some minerals in it, sugar's not that nutrient dense, right? But is it digestible? Abso-friggin-lutely. Like you start to digest sugar when you freaking smell it. You've got salivary amylase in your mouth that will start to digest sugar right there in your mouth. But it doesn't satisfy my criteria of both digestibility and nutrient density. So I'll substitute, a more nutrient-dense sweetener, like a blackstrap molasses or a raw honey or something that's actually nutrient-dense, right? But you'll find that if you sit down to a meal and you just ask yourself those two questions, you're off to a pretty good start when it comes to putting the type of things into your body that you'll be able to deal with, right? So is it nutrient-dense and is it digestible? A few other things that I'm big on when it comes to diet, things I found to be big wins for people. Number one, the thing we see in a lot of these blue zones, right, like areas where we have a higher than normal level of centenarians, people who live to be more than 100 years old, we see a lot of interesting things, right? We see consumption of legumes, a low glycemic index food. We see the consumption of a lot of tannin-rich drinks, right, like teas and wines and coffees, bless their hearts. But we also see a high consumption of plants, very high consumption of plants. And again, not necessarily plants like quinoa that we're just eating, ad libitum without treating, right? But plants that have been prepared, fermented, soaked, sprouted, they've been deactivated, their defense mechanisms have been deactivated. But high amount of plant intake is another component of a successful diet. Controlling blood sugar, and when it comes to longevity, there's a really brilliant guy I talk with, and he's been on my podcast, Dr. Peter Attia, who is convinced that one of the number one predictors of longevity is how frequently your blood sugar spikes throughout the day and how high your blood sugar levels stay throughout the day. Right, so knowing what spikes your blood sugar and what doesn't, spending just like a week with a blood sugar monitor, which you can buy for very, very inexpensively from a drugstore, that will allow you to figure out what your blood sugar is actually doing throughout the week. It's extremely important, especially because we all have like a lot of the same things we eat for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner, right? I can tell you that after I left the hotel this morning to walk here, my blood sugar was freaking sky high because I had sourdough bread, bread pudding, chocolate, and croutons for breakfast. And granted, I had some eggs and stuff like that kind of slow the glycemic index down, but that's kind of an atypical breakfast for me, right? Like I broke some of my own rules. It was a freaking great breakfast. And I did go for a walk afterwards, which helps out quite a bit. But the idea is you always want to be cognizant of your blood sugar levels. I'll give you 3 quick tips to keep them low throughout the day. You guys want my 3 best tips for keeping the blood sugar low throughout the day? It's very, very simple. Number 1, try and consume the equivalent of 2 teaspoons of Ceylon cinnamon each day. You put in smoothies, coffees, teas, whatever. That has a very good blood sugar lowering effect. Ceylon, Ceylon cinnamon. Number 2, try and have a shot of apple cider vinegar. You can start off your day with apple cider vinegar. You could have it before your most carbohydrate-rich meal, but that also has a really, really good effect on lowering your blood glucose. And then the last one is a tip from the Okinawans. Bitter melon. They'll chew on bitter melon before or after a meal. And bitter melon extract is something I have every night before dinner to lower what's called my postprandial, my post-eating blood glucose, right? So those are 3 simple examples of ways that you can keep your blood glucose low. And then moving before or after a meal is very important as well. 2 other things. When you hear the phrase that you are what you eat, or you are what you ate, probably nowhere is that more true than the idea that the fat composition of the foods that you eat are what's ultimately going to make up a very large majority of your cell membranes, right? And so if you're consuming a lot of rancid, heated, pressurized, or oxidized oils, particularly, when you go to the healthy food section of the airport and they've got the healthy apples and you turn over the label and they're, the 3 ingredients are 100% organic Fuji apples, cane sugar, and canola oil. Right, so that's a perfect example of how these vegetable oils are sneaking into a lot of foods. In the U.S., 5-star Napa Valley restaurants cut their olive oil, their fine olive oil, half and half with canola oil. Right, so it's very, very difficult. I actually ask when I go to restaurants most of the time what the food was cooked in. If I'm getting something that has been cooked in oil, and a lot of times, like if you're ordering Brussels sprouts, for example, they cook them in canola oil. You can ask, hey, could you cook those in olive oil, or could you bake them, or could you do those in butter, right? So you can make substitutions, but when you're at home, use very heat-stable oils. Oils are one of the things you really want to pay a lot of attention to. And then finally, moderate your calorie intake. And again, when we're talking about anti-aging and longevity, these are big wins. Be aware of how many calories you're eating. How do I do it? I have what's called a compressed feeding window. And that sounds really fancy, but all it means is that you shut your mouth and you don't eat food for a certain period of time during the day, right? That's it. You just slam your gaping maw shut, tape it if you need to, but I'll go every single day, 365 days a year, Christmas, Thanksgiving, you name it, 12 to 16 hours without eating. All right, so if I finish eating dinner at 8 p.m., I don't eat again until 8 a.m. If I get up at midnight to eat a snack, or if I'm out at a club and decide I'm going to go out to eat afterwards, I won't eat again until 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. the next day, right? So that's a very, very easy way to naturally moderate your calorie intake and also take advantage of the fact that fasting has a longevity-enhancing effect too. It's just harder to eat a lot of calories when you have a shorter period of time, this compressed feeding window in which to eat them. So that's one of the best tips I can give you for moderating your calorie intake. That, and don't do this. I used to go to work and I'd have like my yogurt, my apple, my carrot sticks, my other apple, my banana, my handful of nuts, my handful of seeds, and my little energy bar, right? And like every hour, 2 hours I'd eat because it was supposed to keep your metabolism high and keep your energy safe. It's not true. You don't need to do that. So I eat 2 to 3 times a day. It's a great big meal, 2 to 3 times a day. Give my digestive system a break, teach my body how to burn fats as a fuel. But moderate your calorie intake. Okay, so those are some of the biggies. Next, I want to get into some of the woo-woo stuff, some of the woo-woo stuff that also is going to be a big win for you. One would be electricity. Like I mentioned, I'm very, very careful with Wi-Fi, with Bluetooth. I'm not one of those biohackers that walks around all the time with wires attached to my head, because I always ask myself, how much am I getting exposed to electrical fields and electrical signals that the human body wasn't meant to be exposed to? Like I don't wear a Fitbit or a Jawbone. I was telling some people out there earlier during the lunch break, I've got this dorky cereal box giant ring on. I know some of you also have it on too. But the one reason I wear a ring like this to self-quantify is because on a little app I can put it in airplane mode. Right? So unlike an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or a Jawbone, I'm not getting bombarded by Wi-Fi or by Bluetooth signals all day long. A few of the other big wins that I'd say for you, number one would be use an Ethernet cable whenever you can. So I always travel with the little dongle that will attach to my laptop and allow me to plug in via an Ethernet cable rather than use the wireless or the Wi-Fi at, say, like a hotel or an Airbnb, wherever I happen to be traveling. Number two, forests, the ocean. I love the smell of the air in Iceland, right? Like it's chock full of these what are called negative ions, which are churned out by moving water and trees and wind. But we don't get those indoors. Now, in each room of my house, I have a few things. In my office, I have what's called a HEPA air filter, and it has a negative ion generator on that standalone HEPA air filter. In the central air unit in my house, I have what's called an Aller Air, A-L-L-E-R-A-I-R. That also churns out negative ions that come out all the vents in the house. My wife and I read the NASA Clean Air Study, where the NASA Clean Air Study, they studied all the different plants that do the best job cleaning up toxins in the environment and also churning out these negative ions and making the air more fresh. So we took some of those and we planted those around the house. And then finally, for 20 to 30 bucks, you can get these little negative ion generators you can travel with and you can plug into the wall when you're indoors. And this actually it's a good way if you're stuck indoors during the day, right, to make the indoors a little bit more like the outdoors. A few other things that I'll do for electricity. I have dirty electricity filters in each of the outlets of my home. You can travel with these too. They're very small, but they limit the amount of power surges that come in through the electrical outlet from creating frequent power surges in your home. That can also be a big source of electricity. Air tube headset. So when I talk on my phone, I don't use a Bluetooth. You can actually get these special headsets. They're very affordable, where sound travels through tubes rather than through wires. Very, very simple way to limit the amount of exposure that your head gets. Because if you look at the label on like an iPhone, you're supposed to keep it like an inch away from your skull, and it's very hard to do. And then the Bluetooth headsets that you wear are obviously just emitting a signal all the time. So you use these air tube headsets. A few other things, I've got a phone case. Right? I use one called a Defender Shield. They're also very, very cheap, and don't laugh, but they work. They're little Faraday cages. You can buy them on Amazon, and you just drop your phone in this pouch, and it keeps it from emitting a signal when you say, when you have it in your back pocket or whatever. The shield, or the case that I use is called the Defender Shield. It's a little bit sexier, and you can actually receive calls when you've got it in the case. But it lowers the amount of electricity my body gets exposed to when my phone is, say, in my pocket, and it's not on airplane mode. Two other things. Number one is it freaking drives me nuts when I'm at a conference. I'm looking to see if there's anybody I can embarrass in here. Everybody's being pretty good. And people are sitting on their laptops, right? Their laptops placed right on their gonads, which I don't know about you guys, but I prize my gonads. That's an important organ for my body. And sitting there and frying your sex organs with a laptop, whether you're on a plane or at a conference or whatever, it's not a great idea. Right, so what I use is this laptop pad. You can get a laptop shielding pad that goes right underneath the laptop, so I can work on an airplane, I can work when I'm sitting down. I use one called a HeraPad. That same company that makes the phone case that I have, Defender Shield, they also do a pad for the bottom of the laptop. Perfect way to protect your body, your thighs, your crotch from EMF from coming off the bottom of your computer. And then the last thing, they've got some interesting research that shows that something called pulsed electromagnetic fields, exactly what you'd get when you're doing like what we did on the bike ride last night, where I had everybody take off their shoes and we stood there and just grounded for a while like dirty hippies out in the grass, right? We were getting all that fantastic electricity from the planet seeping up into our bodies. Going outside and grounding and earthing is one strategy. Sleeping on a grounding or earthing mat is another strategy. Wearing or placing underneath your mattress a device like an Earth Pulse or a Flex Pulse or a Delta Sleeper, or any of these different tiny devices that you can take. I've got one back in my hotel room where it's a little device I placed on my collarbone, and it emits the same signal as the planet Earth emits, but it's just straight on my collarbone all night long. And the idea is you're resetting the human battery, right? Your human body is an electrical machine, and when you expose it to these natural frequencies that the Earth naturally emits, well, when you consider the fact that we don't walk around barefoot, we don't sleep on the surface of the ground that much anymore. So we can kind of hack our way into achieving that with a little bit of technology combined with just making it a point to get outside and be barefoot and lay down on the ground. So the next thing is air. I mentioned the NASA Clean Air Study and the HEPA air filters that we have in our house. But there are a few other things that you need to be aware of when you're taking into consideration the air that you breathe. Number one would be the use of essential oils. So I have an essential oil air diffuser in my bedroom and in my office. The one in the bedroom churns out oils that actually enhance alertness. I like pine, I like cinnamon, and I like rosemary as three perfect examples of things that can kind of increase your awareness and your cognition. In the bedroom, I use lavender, I use rose, and I use bergamot. And any of those will relax the body. And so you can actually tweak the air that you're breathing, in the same way that when you're walking through the forest, you're breathing in plant polyphenols. You can churn those same things out in the air throughout your house using an air diffuser. And then finally, one of the things that I'm a big fan of, and there's a great book about this called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McCown, is the concept of breathing through your body's natural filter. When you breathe through your nose, you get a bigger release of nitric oxide, which is like Viagra for your whole body. You filter the air through the tiny little hairs and the turbines in your nasal cavity. The air is more warm when it hits your lungs, so you absorb more oxygen. There's a variety of reasons when you're taking into consideration the air and you're doing all these variables to actually breathe through your nose as much as you can. Breathe through your nose as much as you can. And I've actually experimented with this, and it works pretty well. You can even buy mouth tape, and you can tape your mouth to train yourself how to nasal breathe when you're asleep at night. When you tape your mouth, you want to make sure you apply a little chapstick or oil. The first time I did it, I didn't, and I ripped it off, and it was like pulling duct tape off a wound. But mouth taping at night, you should look it up because it actually works. It sounds funny, but it actually works. So next up is light. Modern lighting is horrible for you. Fluorescent lighting, LEDs, the flicker, the glare, the temperature, it really disrupts your circadian rhythm, which you guys just got done learning about before lunch. Lighting is one of the most important things when it comes to proper circadian rhythms and sleep cycles and just feeling good during the day. So what we use in our house is something called biological LED lighting. Biological LED lighting. What this means is that not only does the lighting have less flicker, and less glare, and less temperature, but the company that I use, one called Lighting Science, they have lights that only produce a large amount of light from the blue light wave spectrum and lights that produce a large amount of light from the red light wave spectrum. So I can eliminate blue light in the bedroom, for example, and I can have plenty of blue light in the gym or the office or kind of like the more living, alert areas. And then a couple of other things that I recommend when it comes to light. There's one that I have on the TV. We don't watch TV a lot, but I have what's called a drift box on the TV, which automatically removes all blue light from coming off of the TV. So you can watch your favorite programs at night without actually having them, keep you up till midnight or disrupt your deep sleep levels. And then two other things that I toy around with sleep that I really like. One is with light. One is the concept of exposing your body to near and far infrared light. Right? Because when you step out into the sun, you're getting UVA, you're getting UVB, you're getting near infrared, you're getting far infrared. But when you're indoors, you're not getting much of that at all. And from enhancing collagen synthesis to increasing growth hormone and testosterone to giving you a ton of cool effects, near and far infrared is a pretty cool thing to play around with. So you can, for example, get near infrared bulbs. You can just plug this into the main bulb that you read next to at night, like in your bedroom, and you can just bathe yourself in near infrared light while you're laying in bed. There are light panels. I have a couple in my office. So when I'm working during the day, I'll flip these on every once in a while. It's just a panel of light on either side of my body, and I can sit there and work with the panel of light shining on my body. And these same near-infrared lights, they've even shown that, like I mentioned, they can increase testosterone, they can increase sperm production when you expose your crotch to the light. So I'll just pull down my pants sometimes when I'm working, and I'll be talking on the phone, naked, standing in front of these lights, just getting all the benefits of the near and far infrared light. So toying around with near and far infrared. I also have a far infrared sauna, and you feel amazing when you get out of that. And it's great for injuries, for sweating, for detoxification. The other thing is something called photobiomodulation. And this is a relatively new technology originally developed for Alzheimer's or dementia patients, but it's this thing that you can wear on your head. And I have one at home. When I get home from a lot of travel, I'll use it. It's like a cup of coffee for the brain. There's a company called Vielight, V-I-E Light, Vielight, and they make this headset device that you wear. It comes with a little nasal probe that you can stick up your nose. Like Tommy mentioned, I like to put things in various orifices of my body. And it shines, exposes your body to this 10 hertz light wave that enhances alertness, and they're showing now that it can do things like clear up a lot of the issues with Alzheimer's or dementia when you use the version that's 40 hertz. Very interesting device. But look it up, photobiomodulation. It's something I recently started using last year, and it's amazing when it comes to the use of light. Two more things I want to show you guys. If we have time. We have time? Go over two more things? I actually don't know. How are we doing? Okay, cool. So the next one is water. Now, you're in a fortunate position in Finland to be able to drink water out of the tap. I'm breaking my own rule right now because I'm drinking out of plastic, which I generally avoid, but sparkling Cristal water is oh so good. When it comes to water, if you are drinking from most municipal water supplies that are not clean, and again, from what I understand and what I studied up on, in Iceland, the water's pretty clean, but I'm a big fan of filtering your water through what's called a reverse osmosis filter, which is going to filter out most of the impurities, and the only problem is that removes the minerals from the water. So you want to use like sea salts or trace liquid minerals or a remineralizer or some way to get minerals back into the water. When I travel, I'll typically drink out of glass bottled water like Pellegrino or Gerolsteiner. And you even want to choose your glass bottled water like Perrier, another popular bottled water brand. It's very acidic compared to Gerolsteiner or Pellegrino or some of these others, which are more alkalinic. So drinking out of glass rather than drinking out of plastic. Using something like a reverse osmosis filter and remineralizing your water is also very important. Your human body is comprised of a great deal of water, so you need to be cognizant of the type of water that you're drinking. Structured water and Hunza water, that's a little bit more woo-woo, but the idea is that A, you can use a structured water filter, and I have one of these in my home. After the water comes out of the well and goes through all the pipes, it passes through this series of glass vortex beads that charge the water. There's some fascinating research by a guy named Dr. Gerald Pollack at University of Washington that goes into this concept. But the idea is that your body can become more hydrated, and remember, your body is a human battery, and so the water that you're drinking is a little bit more favorable from an electrical charge standpoint when you drink water that's been structured. The other thing that you can do, and this is kind of a cool little trick, again, to make water very, very nourishing and absorbable by the human body, is you can put minerals in it, right? Like salts, for example, and this is called Hansa water, and you set it out in the sunlight, right? So you charge the water with infrared rays with a little bit of salt in it, then you take it back inside, and that's your water for the week. And we actually do that in our house. We'll take the structured water, we put it into the big mason jars, and I actually have these big rock caves that I built outside that we'll put the water inside, and we expose it to the sunlight. It's just amazing water. You feel amazing when you drink it. So haven't figured out a way to travel with it with a huge rock water charging station yet, but it's really great to build at home. Plus it's a workout. I mentioned the glass bottled water. Two other things I recommend because I travel a lot. Number one is a good shower head filter because your skin is a mouth, right? So the water that goes onto your body, it's important to take into consideration, right? So if you're bathing in chlorine, for example, that's coming out of the shower head, you want to filter that water. So there are companies like Fixed, as an example, F-I-X-T. They make a really good little shower head filter that you can take with you when you're traveling so you're not bathing in dirty water if you're going to places that don't have good water. The other thing is a travel water bottle that's got a good filter on it, right? So Berkey is a great company. For example, when I'm walking through the airport, if I don't want to pay $7.99 to get a bottled water at the airport, I can just walk up to the water fountain and use one of these BPA-free Berkey water bottle filters, fill that up with water, and that actually has like a carbon stick that filters out a lot of impurities in the water as you drink it. Right? So I'm very, very cognizant all the time. Like the number one thing that I probably put into my body most during the day, aside from a nasal probe, is water, right? So taking into consideration the cleanliness and the alkalinity and the mineral content and the natural nature of the water that you drink is actually really important. So we've got air, we've got light, electricity, water. You learned about nutrition, and you learned about movement. And when it comes to anti-aging and longevity, there are 3 additional things that I consider to be highly important, because when we look at these blue zones, right, these areas where there are a higher than average number of people who are living a long time, yeah, we see the wild plants that I talked about, we see the legume consumption, we see, no surprises here, the absence of cigarette smoking. We see actually a lot of low-level physical activity spread throughout the day, right? People standing, gardening, walking, hunting, fishing, gathering. We see a lot of components that tend to overlap between a lot of these cultures, but there are a few things that I incorporate throughout my day that have also been associated with longevity and with de-stressing yourself. Number 1 is gratitude. Gratitude. So every morning, I wake up and I answer 3 questions. Number 1, what truth did I discover in my reading? Because I read at night real, actual paper books. You probably know what those look like still. And not on the phone, not on the Kindle. I just lay in my bed and read books. I read in the morning as well. And I know that if I'm going to answer that question in the morning, I will read with a clear mind, and I'll be seeking that truth. Because a lot of times in the evening or in the morning, I'm not reading business or health or fitness. I'm reading like inspirational, devotional, things that are a little bit more spiritual. All right, so what truth did I discover? Who can I help or serve today? And you think about it, you name one person who you could help or serve on that day, whether it could be calling your mom, could be helping the neighbor mow their lawn. That means 365 days a year, you're doing a good act for somebody, somewhere. So who can I help or serve today? You got to write it down. You can't just think about it. You got to write it down. And then the third thing is, what am I grateful for? And the simple act of gratefulness has been shown to do a ton of things: decrease blood pressure and increase empathy and improve stress resilience and decrease the number of sick days that you have. It's amazing. But I start off my day with those 3 questions. All right, what truth did I discover? Who can I help or serve? And what am I grateful for? Number 2 is heart rate variability. So because I'm a nerd, I actually quantify this stuff. So every morning while I'm doing my gratitude journaling, I track what's called my heart rate variability, which allows me to measure the strength of my sympathetic and my parasympathetic nervous system, how stressed out my body is during the day, right? Because this is a great way to know if what you're doing is working. It's a great way to know what's going on with, the effects of a supplement you may have had the day before on your nervous system, how stressed out you are, what your body is able to handle that day. If my heart rate variability is very, very low, I'll avoid doing a lot of very, very intense, emailing and consulting and things like that during the day, and kind of rearrange my day to be a little bit more stress-free from things like, hard workouts or hard work. So heart rate variability, look into it. Very, very simple to track. I use an app called NatureBeat, little heart rate monitor. That's just 5 minutes. It's actually as short as 3 minutes. Every single morning, you test your heart rate variability. And then, of course, the final thing that we see that you may have heard about when it comes to these characteristics that we see in the blue zones is this idea of relationships, right? These people have a lot of love in their lives. They've got friends, they've got family, they've got relationships, they're surrounded by loved ones, they're surrounded by laughter. And so even though all these other things that I talk about, the getting out and doing the Tabata sets and soaking your quinoa and sticking the probes up your nose. All these things, really, they're trumped by what I consider to be the number 1 factor, and that's friends, family, relationships, and love. So as you're going about implementing a lot of the things that you've learned and that you will learn the rest of the day, I would encourage you, remember the big picture here, right? There are 110-year-old, cigarette smoking, vodka drinking grandmas out there who feel amazing and who look amazing and who live a long time just because they're surrounded by their friends and they've got great relationships and loved ones in their life. So I would encourage you to prioritize above anything else in your life love, and then everything else can kind of flow from there. So if you guys have questions, just come and find me later on. I don't think I left enough time for questions today. But the website that you can go to is bengreenfieldfitness.com/IHS2017, because I know I just basically gave you an overview of a bunch of stuff, right? So over there are the articles and the podcasts and the things that will allow you to take a deep dive into the specific content that I talked about today. So that being said, Tommy, you tell me, do we have time for any questions or... No, he says. He's kicking me off. Hey, thank you guys so much. Iceland is amazing. You guys are amazing. Thank you.